5 bone-chilling true horror stories. First up, we've got a tale from a former security guard who used to work the graveyard shift at a creepy old warehouse. Let's call him John. Now, John was used to dealing with all sorts of weirdos and misfits on the job. But nothing could have prepared him for the night he came face to face with a real-life monster. It all started when John heard strange noises coming from the loading dock. At first, he thought it was just a stray cat or maybe a rat scurrying around. But as he got closer, he realized the sounds were too big, too heavy to be any animal. With his heart pounding in his chest, John slowly pushed open the door and found himself staring into the glowing red eyes of a massive, hulking creature. The thing was at least 7 feet tall, with matted fur and razor-sharp claws. It let out a bone-chilling roar and lunged at John, who barely managed to slam the door shut in time. He could hear the creature pounding against the metal, snarling and howling like something out of a nightmare. John called for backup, but by the time his fellow guards arrived, the creature had vanished without a trace. To this day, he swears it wasn't human, and that it's still out there somewhere, waiting for its next victim. Our next story comes from a woman named Sarah who claims she was abducted by aliens, and lived to tell the tale. Sarah says she was driving home late one night when she suddenly found herself surrounded by a blinding white light. The next thing she knew, she was waking up on a cold metal table, strapped down and unable to move. Sarah says she was subjected to all sorts of bizarre experiments by her alien captors. They probed her, prodded her, and even implanted strange devices under her skin. But the worst part of all was the mind control. Sarah claims the aliens could read her thoughts and manipulate her memories, making her forget everything that had happened to her. It wasn't until years later, when Sarah started having vivid nightmares and inexplicable flashbacks, that she began to piece together the truth. She says she's still haunted by the experience to this day, and that she'll never forget the cold, inhuman eyes of her abductors. Speaking of unforgettable eyes, our third story is a doozy. It comes from a guy named Mike who swears he saw a real-life vampire feeding on an unsuspecting victim. Mike was walking home from a bar one night when he heard a woman screaming in a nearby alley. He ran to investigate and saw a tall, pale figure hunched over the woman's limp body. At first, Mike thought the guy was just some junkie looking for a fix. But then he saw the blood dripping from the man's mouth, and the way his eyes glowed an unnatural shade of red. Mike says the vampire looked right at him and grinned, revealing a set of razor-sharp fangs. Mike bolted out of there like his life depended on it, and he never looked back. But he says he can still feel the vampire's eyes boring into him sometimes, like a predator stalking its prey. Now let's talk about something even scarier: creepy kids. This next story comes from a babysitter named Lisa who had a brush with the supernatural while watching her neighbor's twin girls. Lisa says the girls were always a little odd. They never smiled, never laughed, and had an unsettling habit of staring at people without blinking. But things took a turn for the terrifying when Lisa found them playing with a Ouija board one night. The girls claimed they were talking to their dead grandmother, who had been buried in the backyard. They said Grandma was lonely and wanted Lisa to come play with her. When Lisa refused, the girls flew into a rage, their eyes turning black as coal. They spoke in a language Lisa had never heard before, their voices deep and guttural like something out of The Exorcist. Lisa got the hell out of Dodge and never looked back. Last she heard, the twins had been shipped off to live with relatives in another state. But sometimes, when she's lying in bed at night, Lisa swears she can still hear their eerie voices chanting in the darkness. And now, for our final tale of terror. This one comes from a hiker named Tom who got lost in the woods and ended up stumbling upon an abandoned cabin in the middle of nowhere. With night falling fast and no cell service, Tom decided to take shelter in the cabin until morning. Big mistake. As Tom explored the cabin, he found all sorts of creepy artifacts, ancient spell books, jars filled with mysterious liquids, and even a human skull sitting on the mantelpiece. But the worst was yet to come. In the middle of the night, Tom was awoken by the sound of chanting coming from outside the cabin. He peeked out the window and saw a group of hooded figures standing in a circle, their faces illuminated by flickering candles. In the center of the circle was a stone altar, and lying on top of it was a still-beating human heart. Tom watched in horror as the cultists raised their arms and began to chant faster and faster, their voices rising to a fever pitch. Suddenly, one of the figures turned and pointed straight at the cabin window. Tom swears he could feel their eyes boring into him, even through the darkness. He ran out of the cabin as fast as his legs could carry him, tearing through the woods like a madman. Tom says he ran for miles before he finally stumbled upon a ranger station and was able to get help. But he's never been the same since that fateful night. He says the image of that still beating heart is seared into his mind forever, and that sometimes he can still hear the cultists chanting echoing in his dreams. So there you have it, 5 true tales of terror to keep you up at night. If you like this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell so you never miss an upload. Leave us a comment with your own scary encounters, and thanks for tuning in to Scaretastic.